Raising children is one of the most challenging tasks in the world. One mother from Arizona thought she'd seen it all, but one day her daughter was really testing her patience, so she did what she had to do. If you've ever been in a car with small children before, then you know how tiresome it can be. They scream at one another, throw toys and food around, and do other unpleasant things. Michelle had to put up with this behavior every time she got into the car with her kids. Michelle's children constantly made her stressed and anxious, and she decided she's had enough. That day, her daughter was out of control, and when Michelle realized what she did in the backseat of her car, she had no other choice but to call the police. The little girl never listened to her parents and always did the opposite of what they told her. However, the trick she pulled that day was just too much for the mother to handle. That morning, Michelle put her children in the backseat of the car, buckled them up in their seatbelts, and drove them to school. Little did she know what was about to happen next. While driving, she heard her kids arguing and screaming at each other for no apparent reason. This happened many times before, so at first she ignored them, hoping they'd calm down soon. Eventually, Michelle glanced at the rearview mirror but still couldn't understand what was going on. Suddenly, her son yelled, "Mommy, Mommy!" She unbuckled her seatbelt. She was talking about his 3-year-old sister, Camille. Michelle immediately pulled the car over so she could buckle Camille into her seat again. She tried to explain to her daughter how dangerous it is to drive without your seatbelt on. Michelle had to make sure she wouldn't unbuckle herself again during the ride. But Camille wasn't taking her seriously. Camille was laughing and ignoring her mother's words. Every time her mother put her seatbelt on, she would immediately unbuckle it. Michelle was losing her mind. What her daughter did was unacceptable and extremely dangerous. What Michelle did when she got home was something that no parent would ever do to their own child. She desperately needed help, so she took her phone and dialed the number. Michelle contacted the Scottsdale Police Department because she couldn't handle her daughter anymore. She was hoping they'd take her request seriously and help her deal with the situation, but the officer's reaction was far from what she expected. She believed her case required extreme methods and hoped the authorities would understand. Luckily, it didn't take long for the police to arrive. A few minutes after making a call, Michelle and her children watched the police car parking in the driveway. They knocked on the door and asked to speak to Camille. Michelle was worried that they wouldn't take her request seriously. After realizing that her daughter was only 3 years old, she opened the door, greeted the officers, and pointed at her daughter. The police officers were speechless. After seeing how young the girl was, they knelt down beside Camille and told her they'd like to have a quick chat with her. The police officers wanted her to understand how dangerous it is to be in a car without a seatbelt. They explained to her that if another driver crashed into her mother's car and she didn't have her seatbelt on, she could get injured or even die. The little girl carefully listened to what the officers had to say. She looked terrified. They also informed her that it was against the law to take off the seatbelt while the car was moving. Camille turned to her mother and finally admitted her fault. "I will always wear a seatbelt and I won't take it off until the car stops and my mother says it's okay to take it off," she said. But Michelle had something else to add. "There might be people who are going to think I took the situation to the extreme. However, I believe it was a teaching moment," said Michelle. She believed calling the police on her daughter was the only way for her to realize her mistake. The police officers sided with Michelle and were happy to teach her daughter a valuable lesson. Michelle might have saved her daughter's life that day. It only takes one reckless driver to ruin everything. The officers were glad that Michelle called them because they knew that after this day, the little girl would never try to unbuckle her seatbelt again. Soon, their story went viral. Inside Edition and Good Morning America interviewed the Arizona mom and her daughter about the incident. They also invited the 2 police officers who talked to Camille about vehicle safety. The show host asked the officer how they felt when they received a call about a 3-year-old girl, and they said something Michelle and everyone else would never forget. Accidents can happen in a split second. If the child's not wearing a seatbelt, the results can be tragic. The officer said they were glad Michelle gave them a call. Parents always need to make sure their children are buckled in.